All right, problem 3-50. Factor 5x to the third y plus 35x squared y plus 50xy completely. Show every step and explain what you did. So, factoring, remember, we are just taking it and simply rewriting this expression as a product of multiple factors. We're not gaining anything, we're not losing anything here. So the first step in factoring is, well, let's write it down first. We have 5x to the third y plus 35x squared y plus 50xy. The first thing we always want to look for is a greatest common factor. We always want to look for a greatest common factor. So as you look at your expression there, between our three terms that we have here, remember our terms are the ones that are separated by the either addition or subtraction signs, in this case both addition signs. We have 5x to the third y, 35x squared y, and 50xy. So in each of these, if we look at our numerals first, what value goes into 5, 35, and 50, or what factor do they all have in common? In this case, we can say that 5 goes into each of those. That is a 5, not a sloppy looking S. I apologize. Now let's look at x to the third, x squared, and x. What value is going to be a factor that they all share? So x to the third, x squared, and x. Well, x does go into all three of these. So the second part of our greatest common factor would be x. And we have y, and y. So obviously y is in common there between our three terms. So our greatest common factor is going to be 5xy. So if we take that here, remember we don't lose anything, we don't gain anything. When you get the greatest common factor, it is still part of your expression. It's just written as a factor of its own. Well, to come up with the remaining part of our expression, we think about it as, if I was going to take 5xy and I was going to multiply it times something here, what would I have to multiply it by to get 5x to the third y? And that would be x squared. Now some people take it and they divide by 5xy, and that's just the same thing. It's the same thing. Think about it just from a different perspective. It will get you the same answer. That is perfectly correct. You do whichever way you were taught and whichever way makes the most sense to you. So 5xy times x squared gives us 5x to the third y plus, well, 5xy times what gives us 35x squared y. Well, 5 times 7 is going to give us our 35. X times x should give us x squared. And y times 1 would give us y. So we don't really have a need to write anything in there for the y. So 5xy times 7x gives us 35x squared y. Then, looking at our last term, 5xy times what gives us 50xy? Well, the xy's obviously would be multiplied times 1 to get xy. So then we look at 5 times what gives us 50, and that would be 10. So we've factored out our greatest common factor, and we now have 5xy times the quantity of x squared plus 7x plus 10. Next thing we need to look at here is our remaining trinomial here, this part of it, does it factor anymore? Well, in this case, it probably does. We've already gotten the greatest common factor out, so let's see if it will factor into two binomials. I'm going to go ahead and use the method of generic rectangles here. If you don't use this method or you feel comfortable with factoring into two binomials there, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. If you don't, this is a great method that works very well once you know how to use it. So we know there that the product of our first two terms in our binomials is x squared. So remember we put that in the bottom left corner. And the product of our last terms in our two binomials is going to be 10, so we can go ahead and put that in our top right corner here. And we're going to be looking for the product of those two terms there, which would be 10x squared, goes in our top, and that should be the same thing as our middle term here, which would be 7x. So we're looking for factors of 10 that add to 7. Well, we know 5x times 2x would give us 10x squared, and when we add 5x and 2x, that would give us 7x. So we can go ahead there and put those in here. We have 5x, we have 2x, and now we're just going to look for the common factors. If we have 5 and 1, there isn't a common factor besides 1 there, but we have x and x squared, so we know x goes into both of those. X times x is what's going to give us x squared. X times 5 will give us our 5x, and x times 2 will give us our 2x. And this all makes sense here because when we look at 2 times 5, that should give us a product of 10, and it does. So we still have our greatest common factor out in front, and we've factored our trinomial now into two binomials. So 5xy times the quantity of x plus 5 times the quantity of x plus 2. Then look at each term here. Do either of these factor anymore? And in this case, they don't. So this answer right here, our 5xy times the quantity of x plus 5 times the quantity of x plus 2 is going to be our answer. We have factored this first expression completely. If you have questions, especially about factoring here, you need to make sure you contact your teacher or go to Math Help if it is available to you. Thanks for listening. I hope that this has helped you.